I need your signature. Tonight. That was the text message. It came from the woman who legally declared me dead 12 years ago so she could start a perfect new life without me. She thinks she is demanding help from the scared kid she abandoned in a motel. She forgot that I grew up to hunt financial criminals for a living. And she just volunteered to be my next target. Before I tell you what I found in her financial records, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who is part of our community. I didn't reply. I didn't ask how she got my number, or why she was contacting me after a decade of silence. I simply set the phone down next to my keyboard and opened a terminal on my laptop. Emotion is a liability in my line of work. Data is the only thing that matters. If Brenda was breaking her own rules of estrangement, it meant she was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. I didn't need to hack the Pentagon to find her. People think cybersecurity is about breaking complex codes. But 90% of the time, it is about social engineering. It is about knowing what someone wants and handing it to them wrapped in a link they cannot resist. I knew Brenda. I knew her vanity was a hunger that could never be fed. I pulled up a template I use for audits. I created a spoof email address that looked like it came from Vogue Living. The subject line was simple. Exclusive feature inquiry. The Scottsdale Charity Gala. I pasted a tracking link in the body, disguised as a portfolio request, and hit send to the public email address listed on her husband's company website. She clicked it in 43 seconds. That click gave me her IP address, her device type, and a backdoor into her cloud synchronization settings. I wasn't looking for bank codes yet. I was looking for the narrative. I needed to know the story she had sold to the world to explain my absence. I scrolled through years of backed-up photos and documents. I saw the timeline of her reinvention. First came the wedding photos. A white dress, a beach ceremony, a man named Gary looking at her like she was a prize he had won at a fair. Gary Jenkins, CEO of a mid-sized tech logistics firm. Wealthy, stable, and completely oblivious. Then came the house. A glass fortress in Scottsdale, Arizona. The kind of place where the air conditioning hums quieter than a whisper and the floors are marble. I saw photos of a teenage boy, her stepson, Justin, driving a BMW I knew she had pushed Gary to buy. But I kept digging. I needed the lie. I searched her cloud for the keywords, children, loss, and tragedy. I found it in a draft of a speech she had given at a fundraiser 3 years ago. I stand here today not just as a wife and mother, but as a survivor. 12 years ago, a fire in our vacation rental in Baja took everything from me. My 2 beautiful children, Maria and Caleb, were gone in an instant. I survived the flames, but a part of me died with them. I stopped scrolling. The hum of the server room seemed to drop away, leaving me in a vacuum of cold rage. She hadn't just abandoned us in a motel with $200. She had murdered us. She had crafted a tragedy to make herself interesting, to gain sympathy, to explain why she had no baggage from her past life. To Gary and her high society friends, Caleb and I weren't abandoned kids struggling to eat. We were angels in the ashes of a Mexican villa. So why text me now? If I was dead, I couldn't sign anything. I switched tabs to the public property records in our biological father's name. He had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind a plot of commercial land in Texas. It had skyrocketed in value. Developers were circling. But the title was messy. It was tied up in a trust that required the signatures of all living biological heirs. Brenda had a buyer lined up. I could see the draft contracts in her email. The land was worth $2.4 million. But she couldn't sell it. Not unless her dead children resurrected themselves long enough to sign a quitclaim deed. She didn't want a reunion. She wanted a ghost to hold a pen. She needed me to sign away my rights so she could cash out. And then she would bury me all over again. I leaned back in my chair, the blue light of the screens reflecting in my eyes. She thought she was contacting a desperate daughter who would do anything for a scrap of attention. She didn't realize she had just invited a forensic auditor into her life. I picked up my phone. I didn't text her back. I called Caleb. "Pack a bag," I said when he answered. "We're going to a funeral. Ours." I looked at the photos of her house again on my monitor. They called it the Glass Fortress in the Architectural Digest feature I found. Floor-to-ceiling windows, white marble floors, cream-colored carpets. You cannot have cream carpets when you have children. You can only have them when you have erased the mess of your past. Seeing that pristine whiteness triggered a memory so sharp it tasted like copper. I wasn't in my server room anymore. I was back at the Starlight Motor Inn. The carpet there had been a sticky, industrial brown, stained with things I was too young to identify, but old enough to fear. That was where she left us. $200. That was the severance package she left on the nightstand next to a half-empty pack of cigarettes. She didn't say goodbye. She just waited until Caleb was in the bathroom, slipped out the door, and drove away in a cloud of exhaust. People talk about abandonment like it is a single moment of heartbreak. It isn't. It is a logistical nightmare. For the first 3 days, we didn't sleep. I made Caleb push the dresser in front of the door every night. We took shifts. One of us slept, while the other watched the handle turn as strangers tried to get in. We learned the economy of hunger. A $1 menu cheeseburger could be split in half. Water from the bathroom tap was free, even if it tasted like rust. We learned that if you sit in a laundromat and pretend to wait for a cycle, you can stay warm for 45 minutes before the owner kicks you out. Brenda likes to tell herself she missed our childhoods. She didn't. She missed the work. She missed the nights Caleb woke up screaming because he dreamt she came back and left again. She missed the humiliation of the social worker putting our entire lives into black trash bags when the money finally ran out. She missed the foster homes that looked at us not as children, but as a monthly check from the state. We were inventory. We were overhead costs that needed to be minimized. I looked at the photo of her stepson, Justin, smiling in front of a pool I knew cost more than my college tuition. Brenda had invested heavily in him. Tutors, camps, cars. She had poured resources into a new model because the old ones were defective. But she made a calculation error. She assumed that without her investment, we would depreciate to zero. She thought we would crumble. She didn't account for the fact that trauma, when processed correctly, becomes a very specific kind of fuel. I didn't break. I calcified. I turned my obsession with survival into a career in forensic accounting because I needed to understand how people hide things. I needed to know how to find the truth when it is buried under layers of lies. I learned that every sin leaves a paper trail, and every debt eventually comes due. I picked up the framed $200 bill from my desk. I had kept it all these years. Not as a keepsake, but as a receipt. She owed us. And I wasn't talking about the inheritance. The $2.4 million from my father's land was just the interest. The principal was the 9 years of fear, the hunger, and the cold. She wanted to close the account on her past life? Fine. But she was going to have to pay the full balance first. I closed the laptop. The digital audit was done. The emotional audit was finished. Now it was time for the physical collection. I grabbed my coat. The glass fortress was waiting. Silence is an asset class. If you hold it long enough, its value compounds. I knew Brenda would not be able to stand the quiet. Narcissists need feedback the way a fire needs oxygen. If you don't feed them, they burn hotter until they consume themselves. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after my digital audit, my phone rang again. It wasn't her primary number this time. It was a burner. An unregistered prepaid line. Smart criminals use burners to hide crimes. Brenda was using one to hide her past from her husband. I answered. But I didn't speak. I just listened to the breathing on the other end. Maria? The voice was exactly the same. It hadn't aged a day. It was the same pitch, the same breathless, victimized tone she had used when she told us the police were chasing Dad. It was the voice of a woman who believed her own lies so deeply that truth was just an inconvenience. I know you're there, she hissed. The facade of the weeping, regretful mother from the text messages evaporated instantly. Stop playing games. We need to handle this. Handle what, Brenda? I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, calm, flat, professional. It wasn't the voice of the crying 11-year-old, she remembered. Don't call me that, she snapped. I'm your mother. And I did what I had to do. You think I wanted to leave you there? I did it for you. I knew I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I set you free so you could find something better. And look at you now. You're alive. You're successful. You should be thanking me. I almost laughed. It was a masterclass in rewriting history. She had framed abandonment as an act of charity. She had turned a motel room with blood on the walls into a launchpad for my success. What do you want? I cut her off. I didn't have time for her delusions. I was on the clock. Your father's land, she said, the mask slipping completely. The developers are pushing for a closing date next week. I need you to sign a quitclaim deed. It just waives your interest in the property. It's a formality. A formality. She was asking me to sign away a $2.4 million asset like it was a permission slip for a field trip. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, her voice dropped, becoming low and ugly, I'll ruin you. I've done my research too, Maria. I know you work for a prestigious firm. How would they like to know about your background? About the foster homes? About the trouble Caleb got into when he was 16? I can paint a picture of you two that would make you unemployable. I'll tell Gary you're stalkers. I'll tell the police you're trying to extort me. Who do you think they'll believe? The grieving mother in the mansion? Or the girl from the gutter? She was threatening me with my own trauma. She thought shame was a lever she could pull. She didn't realize that shame burns off when you survive hell. I didn't care about my reputation. I cared about the math. and the math told me she was terrified. You don't threaten to destroy someone unless they have power over you. She needed that sale to close now. Send me the address, I said. What? I'm not signing a digital copy, I lied. If you want my signature on a document that clears a multi-million-dollar title, I want to see you face to face. I want to meet Gary. I want to meet my brother. No, she said, panic spiking in her voice. Absolutely not. You can't come here. Gary doesn't know. Then no signature, I said. You have a choice, Brenda. You can explain to your husband why his stepchildren are alive, or you can explain to your creditors why you can't sell the land. Which conversation do you want to have? There was a long silence. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she calculated the risk. She was cornered. She needed the money to cover the hole in Gary's company accounts before the auditors arrived. She had to gamble. Saturday, she whispered. We're hosting a charity gala. It's crowded. Security is tight. You come in, you sign the papers in the library, and you leave. You don't speak to Gary. You don't speak to Justin. You sign, and you vanish. Forever. Send the invite, I said. I hung up. She thought she had won. She thought she had bullied me into submission. She didn't know I wasn't coming to sign a deed. I was coming to execute a warrant. I looked at my computer screen. The audit of Gary's company was complete. I knew exactly where the $450,000 had gone. I knew about the shell companies, the fake invoices, the embezzlement. Brenda wanted me to vanish? I was about to become the most visible person in her life. I forwarded the gala details to Caleb. The trap was set. Now I just had to walk into the lion's den and close the door behind me. I didn't buy a ticket to the gala. I didn't have to. During my audit of Gary's company ledger, I found a recurring monthly payment of $50,000 to a vendor listed as Vance Consulting. A quick cross-reference of the state business registry showed Vance Consulting had no employees, no office, and a registered agent address that matched a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 miles from Brenda's old yoga studio. It was a classic shell company. Brenda wasn't just spending Gary's money. She was laundering it, and according to the gala's guest list, Vance Consulting had purchased a platinum table for tonight's event. I printed a high-resolution confirmation email on heavy cardstock. I wasn't crashing the party. I was simply representing the company my mother had created to steal from her husband. Caleb was quiet in the passenger seat. He pulled at the collar of his rental tuxedo, looking at the glass fortress looming ahead. The driveway was lined with Bentleys and Porsches. The house itself was a beacon of light, glowing against the desert sky like a diamond in the rough. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was a crime scene. She's going to call the cops, Caleb said, his voice tight. We're trespassing. We're not trespassing, I corrected, checking my lipstick in the rearview mirror. We're verifying assets. There's a difference. We walked up the limestone path. The air smelled of jasmine and money. At the check-in desk, a woman with a headset smiled at us. But before I could hand over our credentials, a shadow fell over the table. Brenda materialized out of the crowd. She was wearing a silver gown that probably cost more than the restitution she owed us. Her face wasn't fearful. It was furious. She grabbed the security guard's arm, her nails digging into his jacket. These two are stalkers, she hissed, loud enough for the people in line to turn and stare. I have a restraining order. Get them off my property immediately. The guard stepped forward, blocking our path. His hand went to his earpiece. Ma'am. Sir. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Caleb flinched. This was the moment where the old Maria would have crumbled, shamed by the public rejection, terrified of the authority figures. Brenda smirked. She thought she still held the power because she owned the house. I didn't step back. I stepped forward. I bypassed the guard and held the printed confirmation directly in Brenda's face. We aren't stalkers, Brenda, I said, my voice projecting just enough to carry to the nearby donors. We're the representatives for Vance Consulting. Table 4. Gary was very insistent that he finally meet the partners who have been billing him $50,000 a month. Brenda froze. The color drained from her face so fast her makeup looked like a mask. She stared at the paper. She knew exactly what Vance Consulting was. If she kicked us out, she would have to explain to Gary why his company's top consultant was being escorted off the premises by security. If she admitted we were frauds, she admitted the company was a fraud. I leaned in close, whispering so only she could hear. Kick us out, and I shout the truth to the entire line. Let us in, and your secret survives 1 more hour. Your choice. The guard looked at Brenda, waiting for the order. Mrs. Jenkins? Do you want me to call the police? Brenda swallowed hard. She looked at the guests watching us. She looked at the damning paper in my hand. She forced a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. No, she choked out. My mistake. I didn't recognize them in the dark. Let them in. The guard stepped aside. Enjoy the evening. We walked past her. I didn't look back. We were inside the fortress. Now all I had to do was burn it down. The gala was a sensory overload of champagne flutes, silk, and the hollow laughter of people who had never worried about their next meal. Gary was holding court near the ice sculpture, looking every inch the successful CEO. I caught his eye and raised a glass. He smiled, polite and confused, trying to place the face of the major donor his wife had brought in. He didn't get the chance to come over. Brenda's hand clamped around my upper arm like a vice. Library, she hissed. Now. She marched us through the crowd, her smile fixed and terrifying, nodding at guests while digging her nails into my skin. We slipped through a side door into a room that smelled of old leather and unread books. The moment the heavy oak doors clicked shut, the facade dropped. Brenda didn't scream. She unraveled. She paced the Persian rug, her hands shaking as she poured herself a drink from the crystal decanter on the desk. You have no idea what you've done, she said, her voice trembling. Coming here? To my house? In front of my friends? It's a nice house, Brenda, Caleb said, his voice flat. Better than the motel. Stop it. She spun around, her eyes wild. She checked her watch, then looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. I don't have time for your guilt trips. I have a deadline. The auditors are coming on Monday. Do you understand what that means? If that land sale doesn't close and the money isn't in the corporate account by Friday, I go to federal prison. Brenda was desperate. She had stolen from her husband, and the clock was running out. She stepped into my space, eyes cold and hollow. You were supposed to stay dead, she whispered. I mourned you. Built a life on that tragedy. Why did you come back? To her. We weren't children, we were clerical errors. Caleb stiffened beside me. I stopped him. I'll sign, I said. She froze. The quitclaim deed. You get the land and the $2.4 million. You repay Gary and stay out of prison. I signed. Caleb followed. Brenda snatched the paper, smug again. You're still weak. Now get out. We're leaving, I said. But first let's check the math. I laid it out. $450,000, stolen over 5 years. Tuition. Pool renovations. A BMW lease. A perfect life for another child. And us? Zero. $200, and abandonment. She scoffed. I win. You have the deed, I agreed. I pulled out a blue folder. But your accounts are about to be frozen. I walked into the hall straight to Gary. I'm the auditor you hired, I said, handing him the file. Brenda lunged. Caleb blocked her. Gary opened it. Forged checks. Vendor lists. Transfers to her son. His face drained. You stole from me? She panicked. I was going to repay it. I have the deed. Gary stepped back. She told me her children died. We survived, I said. We're the ghosts. He made one call. Freeze accounts. Cancel cards. Terminate access. Security arrived. Escort her out. Brenda screamed as she was dragged across the marble floor, heels scraping, guests staring. You have paper, I told her. But no money to spend. She was gone. The next morning, Gary filed charges. 3 days later, Brenda was arrested at a cheap motel exactly where she had left us. That night, I deleted her file. Revenge isn't hate. It's accounting. She stole our childhoods. I took her lie. Case closed. On my wall hung the framed $200 bill she abandoned us with. Tonight. It wasn't humiliation. It was seed money. She didn't break us. She forged us.